Hi, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome as we have people rolling in. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Karen Bell, and I'm an Associate Director for Partners for Advancing Health Equity, or the P4HE, collaborative for short. We are a national research learning collaborative that aims to bring together various sectors that are working on health equity, including government, academia, community-based organizations, philanthropy, and the private sector. We are based in the newly named Celia Scott Weatherhead School of Public Health and Tropical Medicine at Tulane University, and we are sponsored by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Here at P4HE, we convene these sectors to work together to better understand critical issues related to attaining health equity. One of the ways we do this is by providing spaces for activities to engage with these groups in insightful conversations on timely topics and to promote actionable solutions. In today's webinar, we will discuss reproductive justice as a matter of health equity. Every day, people encounter discriminatory situations that can diminish their personhood or be life-threatening when it comes to pregnancy, childbirth, and contraception. The political climate in which we live exacerbates these risks due to policies and systemic barriers that restrict access to quality care, insurance, contraception, and abortions. This is especially the case for Black and Native American birthing people, as well as people with disabilities, among other groups. Today, speakers with varying perspectives on and experiences with reproductive health will share their insights on reproductive justice for the advancement of health equity. Speakers will discuss ways that organizations across sectors can effectively collaborate to develop, implement, and champion reproductive justice policies in pursuit of improving health outcomes for all. So before we hear from our panel, we want to hear from you. We want you all to drive this conversation. We will be using Mentimeter to do that, which you can access by scanning the QR code on your screen or by going to www.menti.com on your browser or mobile device and entering the code 56553362. So I'm going to do that as well. Maybe that'll keep me from being so tongue-tied today. I'm not sure what's happening, but I'm going to go to menti.com and I'm going to put in the code. And I think I said the wrong code out loud. You should use the one on your screen. Yes, the one on your screen is 34175626. So once you're in there, you can give us a thumbs up to let us know you're there. I see several thumbs up. Yeah, the thumbs up are rolling in. So you can also scan the QR code on your screen to get into Mentimeter. And I think we can go to our first question. It says, how familiar are you with the concept of reproductive justice? You can pick one of those options and slide it into the little option here. Okay, so you can pick one and go from there. All right, so we have, most people say they're very familiar with reproductive justice, somewhat familiar, is in second place, a little familiar, and we have very few people who say they're not at all familiar, which I was suspecting. I think that this is a area where a lot of work is being done. And so I'm excited to see that we are all somewhat familiar or a little familiar, but I think by the end of this session, we will be much more familiar with the work that is going on in this field and working on how to make the changes that we need in our society and in our communities to address the issue of reproductive justice. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide. I gave a thumbs up for that. So yeah, let's move to the next slide. And it says, what changes do you think are needed to address reproductive justice? You can answer this question however you want. This is open-ended. You can also put in multiple responses. But what changes do you think are needed to address reproductive justice? I'm going to type in my answers as well. But yeah, if you need to take some time, go ahead. If you have those answers off the top of your head, go for it as well. Like I said, you can put in multiple answers. And you all know by this point that we do these live Mentimeter polls so that our panelists can see what you all are thinking. Also, so that you can see what other people in this space are thinking. Okay, so I see funding several times. So more funding for reproductive justice orgs, valuing bodily autonomy, addressing structural racism, yes. Better healthcare systems, yes. Policy, universal healthcare, done with the patriarchy, yeah. Cost of care, more diverse types of care, racism in medicine, listening to patients, yes. Listening to the lived experiences of people who this affects, definitely change to policymakers, more evidence-based lawmakers. Yeah, we would definitely want that. Educate men, especially BIPOC men, about their responsibility to address reproductive justice. Okay. Equitable access to services with no barriers and more community-based data collection. Love that. Data justice built into policies, respecting one's wishes. +1 on the patriarchy thing, and misogyny is real in our society, as we have seen. Education, rebirth as normal rather than a medical event. Yeah, so educating people to view birth as a normal, natural thing, experience rather than a medical event. Having a minimum floor for basic healthcare, yes. Did I miss any? Increasing access. Yeah, these are all super important, and we appreciate you all for sharing these. Like I said, our panelists are able to see these right now. And I'm sure, oh, I missed an important one, voting. So yeah, being involved in the political process is clearly necessary and is ongoing, because not just voting does it. Yeah, so our panelists can see these responses. You all can see each other's responses. I think what we will do, unless you want to, actually, you can keep adding to this webinar poll if you want. We really appreciate you all for sharing and providing this input. Obviously, like I said, we're going to incorporate it into the conversation. We're excited to have you all here. Please continue to share your thoughts and comments in the chat throughout today's discussion. You can also join this conversation with your questions and comments beyond this webinar on Twitter or our other social media platforms by using the hashtag partners, the number 4HE. All right, so we are going to introduce the panel. I'm just going to introduce their names, ask them to just say hi really briefly, and then once I get finished with the introduction, I will ask each of them to describe their work. So first we have Joy Spencer, who is the Executive Director of Equity Before Birth. Joy, hi.
Hello, hey, happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Nicole Deggins, who is the founder of Sister Midwife. Hi, Nicole.
Hello, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you for being here. And next, we have Dr. Monica McLemore, who's the interim director for the Center for Anti-Racism in Nursing at the University of Washington School of Nursing. Your title was the longest, so I wanted to make sure I got it all out. Thank you for being here, Dr. McLemore.
Thank you. And I'm the permanent director for the Manning Price Spratland Center for Anti-Racism and Equity in Nursing.
Okay, thank you so much.
Position. I'm so excited.
Awesome. Congrats on that. And thank you so much for clarifying. Thank you all for being here. And so really what I want to do is ask you all each to tell us about your work. If you could tell us about what you do, and also I think we want to know what are some reproductive justice issues that you work on. And we also want to know, this is a 3-part question, sorry. What are the root causes of these reproductive justice issues? And honestly, since we went a particular, or actually, Dr. McLemore, since you are unmuted, why don't you go ahead first, if that's okay?
It's totally fine. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. So, first of all, everybody, thank you for making the time. And I'm just honored to be here with my co-panelists because I admired them deeply on socials. And now we're like finally getting to meet in person, Joy. It's really cool. Um, I have to say that reproductive health rights and justice is really important. And quite frankly, I have been trying to work on a definition for reproductive health equity. So let's start off. If you are a known and true, and this audience knows quite a bit about reproductive justice, you know that our colleagues who created it, this was our 30-year anniversary in June of its actual creation in 1994, and they will tell you that reproductive justice is the right to have children, to not have children, to parent the children that we have in safe and healthy environments, free from any violence from any government, state, or individual. And we have the right to disassociate sex from reproduction, which allows for us to talk about healthy consent, pleasure, as part of a whole human life, right? For me, though, reproductive health equity is a different construct. And I want to try on a definition for you all that's built off of what Dr. Kamara Jones from Public Health talks about health equity, right? Health equity is the assurance of the conditions of optimal health for all people. That's how Dr. Jones defines it. So I want to add to that definition and get us to think about that reproductive health equity is the assurance of the conditions of optimal health for all people using reproductive justice as the mechanism to ensure whatever trajectory individuals envision for their lives. Right? It's this idea that we are going to build a healthcare infrastructure. We are going to build community partnerships. We're going to build philanthropy. We're going to build our institutions to be able to serve whatever trajectory people imagine for themselves. And so for me, that is how I am currently thinking about reproductive health rights and justice.
I appreciate the definitions, placing us in a historical sense as well, and charting a path forward in those beginning sentiments. So I appreciate that, and we'll definitely come back to a lot of what you said. But I guess we'll go in reverse order. Ask Nicole if you can talk about what you do, if there are specific reproductive justice issues that you address, and how you think about the root causes of those.
Yeah, so that was a great segue from Dr. McLemore. I'll talk about, for me, most of my work is centered in birth justice, right? So for me, birth justice is a piece of birth equity, health equity, reproductive justice. And that's where I center most of my work. And when I think about birth justice, and there is no single definition of birth justice, but for me, when I think about birth justice, it really means having a space where people can give birth wherever they want to give birth, with whoever they want to give birth with however many people they want to give birth with, whether it is in a hospital or at home, at a birth center, with a home birth midwife, with their cousin, with the nurse midwife, with however you want to bring forth this life out of your body. We want you to be able to do that with informed consent, without force or intrusion, with factual information, and with respect and dignity. So for me, when I think about reproductive justice, I move into shift into birth justice as a piece of that. And a lot of where I've been doing my work as a part of that is training birth workers and supporting them in this journey to be a piece of the puzzle, a small drop in the bucket piece of the puzzle, y'all. Doulas are all over the news everywhere as though they are the golden ticket to the Willy Wonka factory. And let me tell you something, they are not. So it is so important that we see them with all of the value and glory that they provide for us, and also understand that they're a piece of the puzzle. So I have centered a lot of my work on training and supporting Black birth workers to be able to show up in their authentic Blackness, to support Black families without apology, and feeling very centered in the fact that it is okay and necessary for them to show up who they are, as they are, just as they come, right? That you don't have to fit your doula work into a box that anybody else has defined of what this work is. And I'm not going to do it right now, but at some point, I'm happy to do the differentiation between doulas and midwives. There's often confusion because I am a midwife, and my business is Sister Midwife Productions. I guess I'll do it right now, but I train doulas, and the fast and simple answer is the level of expertise, the amount of training, and what they're responsible for. So doulas get a short training, 32 to 40 hours. Midwives have years and years of training. They are real medical people. They do medical diagnoses, they prescribe, they are in charge of the safe passage of that mother and baby through this pregnancy and birth experience. Doulas are your sisters, your cousins, your friends, your aunties who have extra information to show up, support, and help you advocate for yourself during the pregnancy and birth experience. They provide informational, emotional, and physical support, spiritual support during that process, but they do not diagnose or prescribe, and they do not do births alone. They are a part of your team. I'll stop there.
And there are abortion and death doulas.
Sure, we all together. It's one big doula, and then we segue into how we work. Right? So some doulas will just work postpartum. Some doulas might just do labor. Some doulas don't do hospital birth. They only do births and a birth or home birth. Some doulas will support you for miscarriages and abortions. Some doulas will support you through a death. When I teach my students, I tell them that there is no separation from preconception to postpartum, and that we do not have to define the different doulas. Just show up and support. Just show up and do the work. So we can talk about that, Monica, off the air.
You can do it on the air if you want. I'm fine with that too.
But I'm here from Miss Joy.
Yes. Yes, Joy, if you want to go ahead and share with us what you do, the reproductive justice issues that you work on, and how you feel about the root causes of those.
Yeah, so I am an advocate, I am an activist, I am a mama, and I channel my mama energy into helping other mamas and birthing people on a daily basis. I have the pleasure of serving Equity Before Birth, and we are a nonprofit organization, and we fuse economic justice with birth justice. What that means in a nutshell is helping to eliminate, like, if finances are the barrier to you not receiving the level and quality of care or the care team that you need and deserve, we want to eliminate that financial barrier. What that looks like for us is we raise money to cover the cost of doulas, midwives, transportation to your doctor, therapy, perinatal education, so your breastfeeding lactation support or your childbirth education class. We also give direct cash assistance for essential baby items. Every baby needs, diapers, wipes, some sort of milk. We also have a cohort that we call the Liberated Birth Recovery Fund. That's a cohort of working parents who don't get paid maternity leave benefits from their employer. And we meet monthly, and we do financial literacy, and we do blood pressure training, and we do healing circles, and we do, holistic empowerment care. And after you have your baby, for 3 months, you get $2,000 a month to help offset the cost of those bills that you would maybe get behind on while you sit and don't get paid from work. So we mimic a paid leave program and funnel that impact data and those stories up to our elected officials to say, hey, we need a statewide and a nationwide paid leave for all program. And so in addition, we know the importance of boosting mental health. So we have family engagement programs. We have quarterly mama moments. We have a group chat like, girl, my man is tripping. And we help, drop resources there. We also do an annual Mama's Night Out. Leave that man and them kids at home. We pay for we provide childcare stipends and transportation stipends for mamas to just come hang out with us. Every Black Maternal Health Week, we do a big community-wide dance party where it's fun for the family, face painting, food, line dances, the whole nine. And so we are there not as a transactional space, but as a relational space. We are very community rooted, very much value building relationships and building trust. And we take that seriously. We also do some advocacy work. So we take what we hear, we have listening sessions and different things, and funnel that up to decision makers and elected officials, but also advocating on the individual level. So we've gotten phone calls at, the late wee hours of the morning or odd hours of the night saying this doctor, this nurse isn't treating me well. And we will pull up at the hospital. We've gotten the phone calls from some of our most vulnerable families being, let's say, targeted by CPS and things like that. And we will go to court with you. We will drop off diapers, breast pumps, wipes, grocery store gift cards and things of that nature. So we really provide the wraparound services and help to eliminate the financial barrier of those wraparound services to help augment and improve and give folks the birth experience they deserve.
Joy, I had to keep a straight face while you were talking, but what I really wanted to say was wow, and that's a lot. Even some of our staff in the comments in the chat commented on how comprehensive and how this is everything, what you're doing, what all of you all are doing. So I just want to say, first of all, I appreciate you for your work. Especially in my home state of North Carolina, which I said I was not going to continue to mission on these webinars, but I can't help it. One thing that came up for me while you were speaking is how do you do this? Because it should be done everywhere.
Well,
Like
Karen,
it's so clear. Go ahead. I'm Dr.
can
Marcus.
I actually make a point? I mean, Joy, your work is just so amazing, and everything that you are doing and everything that you've built, in my mind, further reinforces this notion, and this is some of the policy work that I do. I do teach as a professor, right? So I didn't really tell y'all what I do, but that's okay. But the work that you do is providing very serious and very important data and evidence as to why we need to restore a robust social safety net, right? This idea that everybody's trying to medicalize everything and we're going to address social needs in healthcare. You are building an authentic path. You said two words that I thought were very profound that I want to lift up because I hope this audience hears it. And that is, you said you are not transactional and you are relational. And one of my biggest concerns that I've said to people is we undermine our arguments for a robust social safety net, paid family leave, making sure we extend Medicaid out a year postpartum, like all that's social, like that's human services. Health and human services go together for a reason, right? And so you're doing that work. And by trying to address social needs within healthcare, we are transactionalizing what you are relationally building. And I really hope people make that distinction and understand why what you're doing is so important. So I had to say this because I see too many people trying to medicalize social needs, and it's becoming very transactional and not helpful. And you are doing the real work. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. And then we know, even if you want to take a medical lens, that, mental illness and poor mental health is one of the leading causes of maternal death. And so if we don't wrap folks around these social supports that can give them the support they need, give them a boost in their mental health, our birth outcomes are going to continue to wane and get worse. But yeah, so thank y'all. And we have to work together. 99% of births happen in a hospital setting, right? So we have to work together, especially here in North Carolina. So argue, put some respect on mamas doing the work to help mamas, put some respect on community-led initiatives. I would encourage everybody to do that. We want to be able to share power, able to influence decisions and make decisions that impact our care. But yeah, how do we do it? It's a labor of love, y'all. It's a lot. We are very new this month. We just turned 4 years old. And in 4 years, we have had over 230 birthing people enrolled in our programs. We only have 4 full-time staff, and we cover a span of 5 counties. Our programs are 100% funded by individual and foundation donations. Like I said, I've always been an advocate. I've always been an activist. I'm the pesky person at the protest, at the city council meeting, at the county commissioner meeting. And so we have a very boots on the ground approach. And so the community is starting to recognize us, and they are starting to support us. And so in those 4 years, we've covered the cost of perinatal and birth services to the tune of a little over $350,000. And so we use grant money and grant funds to sustain our operations, our equipment, our salaries, and things of that nature, so that we can run our programs in the way that we run our programs. We have a strong set of core values and financial values. All money isn't good money. If you aren't allowing us to give direct cash assistance, if you aren't allowing us to pick up the mama who needs a ride to the doctor or to the courthouse, we can't take your money.
Can I just chime in? I love this. And one of the things that I have talked about, so at one point, here in Louisiana, we were doing the Birth Story Project. It started off just as a safe space for Black women to come and share their stories. This was pre-COVID. This was pre everybody yelling from the rafters about Black maternal health. It was a necessary thing. And COVID kind of stopped me from doing them, but it was that space. And I remember having a conversation with a state partner who was at the state, like in the State Department. And the question was, well, what do they get when they come? And I said, well, they get fellowship. They might get a hot lunch if they come on time. They get conversation, right? And in her mind, the fact that we were simply hosting a circle without giving money, she didn't feel like that was worth anything. And what I realized and what I tried to help her understand is that, like you just said, they get listened to and they get to tell their story and they get to be heard and they get to bear witness to their experience. And so we cannot underestimate the value of just that, which is often what I'm training my doulas. I talk to them about, and somebody talked about community health workers and how sometimes doulas can sound a little bit like community health workers, and it does depend on where they are, how they're serving, and how they're trained. So in my training, I train them with the community health worker mindset, right? So they're not community health workers. They really get a lot of information about reproductive justice and birth and labor and centimeters and dilation and all of those things. But the mindset that I hope that they leave with is this understanding that this cannot be just one little blip in the day, right? It has to be an ongoing continuation of support in many different ways, and that just the birth is great if you just want to change the birth outcome. But if we're talking about social change, if we're talking really about changing the paradigm, if we're really talking about impacting birth outcomes and eliminating disparities, then we have to go a step further. And so this combination of community health worker combined with the education of a doula, that is something that we did here. And a couple of my Healthy Birth ambassadors, I've seen them in the chat, we created a perinatal community health worker training called Healthy Birth Ambassadors here in Louisiana to provide some of these things. And then the last thing, as we get up on election season, when you talk about bringing people to the polls, bringing people to the doctor, when I'm on my state events at a community event there, I have this mantra that I like to say that we should all be midwives, and midwives just means with woman by definition, right? And so I'm like, the same way we advocate, and let's put them in the van and bring them to vote, let's put them in the van and get them to their prenatal appointments. Let's put them in the van and get them to their postpartum appointments or to the emergency room or whatever it needs that they need, to the grocery store. Let's not just stop at putting them in the van to pull a lever in a secret booth, but also to continue advocating and becoming healthy for themselves.
Thank you. You all have already answered this question a bit, but I'm going to ask it formally. I'm going to ask one question formally and then ask another question informally. The formal question, just for, the record and for, anybody who is not familiar with these areas, what is stopping us? What are the forces that are stopping us from having reproductive health equity and reproductive justice? Just for the record, we don't have to spend too much time on explaining those because I'm an academic too, and I feel like we spend way too much time intellectualizing and we just stare at our navels and we don't get to do the work. So, or y'all are doing the work, but more work can be done because we just say, oh, what's systemic racism? How do we measure it better? Like, okay, but can you all state some of the things that are stopping us from getting there? And then I'm going to ask you, what do we do about that?
Now I'm going to start because I'm going to say it because it needs to get said. Cowardice and fear, right? The omnibus has been languishing in our Congress, which started off as 9 bills and now it's 12, with a bipartisan group of 100 people led by the Black Maternal Caucus. And these are the people that we have elected, we hired them to represent our interests and needs. And you have over 100, 20 members of the caucus, bipartisan, trying to pass bills to improve maternal health data, Veterans Administration, substance use disorder, the whole 9 yards. And it has been languishing in the Congress and still is not the law of the land. So in my mind, if we always say, and Charles Johnson says this really well for Cure for Moms, you either are a mama, you got a mama, whatever it is, that we need people to really prioritize the health and well-being of childbearing families, pregnant, capable people, whatever inclusive term you want to be able to use, so that they have the things that they need in order to be able to thrive, live, and survive. Cowards and fear are the two things that keep us from being able to move this forward. And at some point, I'm going to call people liars, because there's no reason that you should be signing on to a caucus or a legislation or write grants and say you want to improve health outcomes, but then you don't do the work, because at some point you're a liar. But right now, cowards and fear-based leadership.
Yeah, I'll hop in and say, of course, racism, sexism, classism, all the isms, all the isms. And then it's hypocrisy for me. We always, everybody at the campaign wants to kiss the little babies. We always say we care about babies and mamas and families, but the policy doesn't back that up. How people are being treated doesn't back that up. The power sharing doesn't match up. Words are not matching actions. The bullet points are beautiful. They are pretty. Everybody has a racial equity statement and point of view and all that, but the actions are not building up to the pretty words that people are putting on paper. Mamas, people with lived experience are not respected for their expertise. If I have been through this, even if I haven't been through this, if I've witnessed this, if I've been impacted by this, I know a little more about what works and what doesn't work than I'm given credit for. And so we really need to work on stop being hypocrites, placing value on lived experience, seeing that as a form of expertise, listening to the folks instead of having our decisions being made by people who will never literally walk in our shoes or intimately know the issue, so they won't intimately know the solution.
And don't need to say much because they did it so well, but I'll just add in, the way that this country was built, it still unfortunately exists on many of the foundations that it was built on. And until we really dismantle the systemic issues that we have as a country, a lot of this stuff will continue to just be rhetoric. And so when thinking about this idea of fear and people being liars and the false rhetoric, right? It's like, that's what it is, because it's really, y'all don't really care. It sounds good on paper, and your person over here said, well, if you sign this on paper over here, I'll sign that on paper over there. But our entire political system has so much farceness into it. Not all of it is a farce, but so much of it is a farce. And the people of the scratching in the hands and the scratching of the backs, they don't really care. They don't really care. And so when I understand that, I then challenge us, in the meantime, while we are waiting for the thing to pass, think the such and such to happen, all of that, what are we doing? Let's put on your boots and let's get marching. Tote your backpack, put whatever in it need to go in it, and let's get marching. And I don't mean marching on the Capitol Hill. I mean marching to the hospital, marching to our prenatal visits, marching to cook some food for that postpartum mom, marching to help her when she's going through her postpartum depression, anxiety, or whatever it is. Like, we just have to get involved and do the work for our community while we are waiting for Monica to tell them to stop lying.
Well, actually, no, in 3 weeks, we should vote and fire them all.
Sure. Sure. And
because, I mean, last time I checked, there's something like 235 seats that's up in Congress. So if the current people who are supposed to be representing our interests don't want to do the work, then maybe we should fire them and find some people who do, right? The other thing I think we need it all. I actually think that, quite frankly, and this is the inconvenient truth around reproductive justice, birth equity, there's a reason I'm a plaintiff in lawsuits around the country, because we need the law to sue people in order to be able to make sure that people get the care that they deserve, right? They're until the reimaginers come up with the whole nice utopia we all gonna go exist in. We need our current structure. We need it all. We need people in the law. We need people in the arts. We need people in healthcare. We need people in human services. We need people in business. We need people in philanthropy. We need everybody to act accordingly, because we have too many people who know how to say what needs to get done, but they're not doing it. They want to look like they're doing the work without actually doing it. And what we need is action, right? We have had 2 documented preventable Black maternal deaths in Atlanta, Georgia, thinking that abortion was no longer legal and they did not seek care for preventable complications come through. Candy and Amber, say their names, right? So in my mind, this is more about what actions are people going to take in their sphere of influence, in their sphere of domain now to change the future. And part of that means while the dreamers are dreaming up whatever we go on work on, we need to be using the systems that we currently have now until they're dismantled. And I know that makes people uncomfortable, but
Thank you for mentioning those deaths and saying their names, particularly in a Black Mecca, you know, the quote unquote promised land. I want to ask you all a side question that when Joy talks about what she does, the underlying beliefs and practices are so antithetical to what is done in academia, what is done in business, what is done in law, all of those venues and places or aspects that you mentioned, Dr. McLemore. How do we get community to be the driver, love to be the driver, justice to be the driver in these spaces where people are acting out of fear? Politicians say they're going to do all this stuff on the omnibus, but they don't. Like, how do we actually get those changes in people's beliefs and in their hearts to do the action that we need?
I'll start us off with this, and I think it's something that Dr. McLemore mentioned as well, is getting new people in decision-making roles and in powerful positions, because what we're experiencing now is the folks making the decisions, they don't trust community. It's not that we don't have any evidence base. We give 3 months of paid leave because the evidence said 12 weeks of paid leave boosts infant brain development, reduces postpartum depression and anxiety, all these things, right? We give essential baby items because that's what the research says. We give people transportation to the doctor because that's one of the barriers for people not receiving prenatal care and postpartum checkups. Like, so everything we do is evidence-based. They just don't trust me as a mama because I don't have 3 degrees sitting behind my name, and maybe, you know, I'm not trained as an MD or things like that. And so the more trust that is put on community leaders and community-led initiatives, the more investment. In this capitalist society, we value things with money. And so the lack of investment and the lack of funding for community-led initiatives shows that they don't trust and value the community to be in control of our own solutions. And so building relationships will help with that. Come sit with us, come see, come look at the baby we have down the hallway, you know what I mean? Talk to mamas, figure out why and how this mama became homeless, why and how this mama wouldn't dare step foot in another hospital, but will call us and say, hey, come help me catch this baby. Figure out why and how they smiled and nodded the whole 15 minutes through that appointment and came out crying, Miss Joy, I need a therapist. Like, let's talk about it and let's build that relationship, build that trust. If folks in power would trust community, then we would see that through investment. We would see that through infrastructure. We would see that through, I think somewhere somebody put, I think on the Menti, data justice and things like that. You all would help us. I'm passing out diapers out my trunk. I don't always have time to sit here and count each individual diaper and like put the data to it. But with a team of folks, we could do that. We've never lost a mama and we've never lost a baby that has enrolled in any of our programs. Those are the outcomes that all of the medical institutions are trying to get to. So it's not that what we're doing doesn't work. It's that, are we trusted? Are we valued? Are we being invested in to lead these community initiatives and make it happen?
well, and let me add to that, right? Because as somebody who sits as an only in one of the last remaining vestiges of democracy, right? It's lonely. I mean, there's a reason I use endowed professorship funds to fund Black-led organizations around the country, like DMPs of Color, or, pathway programs to allow for people to join the health professions, or that I put one of the craziest ideas on the planet in front of my Robert Wood Johnson Foundation program officers to say that we should pay community members $125 an hour and mandate lay 200-word summary abstracts for our science and create a whole new paraprofessional group of people who are community reviewers, such that as the editor-in-chief of a journal, I can look at the peer review, I can look at the community review, put those two together and decide whether or not an article should be published or not. That's a direct action. That is the use of existing power to put into that investment. But people not just going to invest just because you're nice. We can't even get the Black billionaires to do that. So in my mind, the way that I think about it is if you are holding power wherever you are, because then I went to my publisher and said, Mary Liebert, if health equity is successful in orienting and training a community advisory board, 20 people to be paid a living wage to review our science, to ask them to review 5 articles a year, will you implement this throughout the entire suite of journals that you publish? Because you publish 120. And then we could mandate that all authors have to write a lay summary for that group of people to review. And then we were going to roll it out across the whole suite of journals. That's how you leverage power in the now. That will also give people meaningful employment. They will be able to participate in the scientific enterprise and get paid for it. I can't be the only person that thinks about stuff like this, right? So we need your work and that investment. We need the incredible training that Nicole and her team are doing. We need everybody doing all of that, but we also need people. And again, this makes me really unpopular, but there are people hoarding power right now and not investing. And we need more people to go into those spaces and disrupt that hoarding of power. And it's not a higher moral ground if you're operating outside of the institutions and the machinery, because our people still need those institutions and machinery to work.
This is so juicy. I was going to have you, Karen, repeat the question, but I think I'm just going to keep moving it forward as I think about. So I love this research, this lay summary, because look, some of us nursing people need to lay summary for real, Dr. McLemore. So tell them to give us that thing. That said, I've also envisioned, and you can bring this to your other people, to whoever you have in power who can handle this. I really envision, I say all of the time, as a nurse person, oftentimes when I read stories of Black maternal deaths, not all the time, but some of the stories of morbidity and mortality, I only had one mortality in my entire years of nursing, and I wasn't even the nurse. I happened to be there, right? But I remember being on the unit where I went home after 12 hours and I'm like, thank God nobody died last night, because we were short-staffed. We had 3 nurses when we should have had 6. And so I propose that we change our entire medical education model so that nurses in particular, if you in particular going to a state school, and I didn't even go to a state nursing school, right? I went to a private nursing school, but that said, if you are going to a state nursing school, you should have 100% tuition paid for. We need our medical system to be bigger, to be more robust. We need more nurses. Okay, that I'm giving that to Dr. McLemore so she can call me up and we can figure out how to make that a thing.
Well, I'm working on that, because that's how I ended up with 3 degrees from state institutions, because I went to all state institutions and I came out with no student loan debt.
And that's important. That shifts so much in equity, right? So then the other thing that I talk oftentimes, I'll do presentations and it's like, okay, here is the problems. And then we end up with what can we do? And I always end with the policy slide. And I remind people that policy is on many different levels. And we need experiences and stories and ways to show the power of different things on every level. Because if we start, even if you're at a university, and you are a professor or you are a housekeeper or whatever you are at this university, and you had a baby and you do not have maternity leave for you, maybe challenging at the state level feels too big, but how about you challenge just to your department head, who can challenge to their department head, who can change the policy at your university. So now the entire Louisiana State University educational system has a system, and then Ochsner sees it, and then the state of Louisiana can see it, and then the United States can see it. You're at a high school. There's no place for the young girl who is pregnant to go and put her feet up. You're a teacher at that high school. What can you do to change the policy at that high school? You're a student at Xavier University and you are pregnant. And they're telling you that the lounge for breastfeeding and pumping is only for the faculty and not for you as a student. What can you as a student do to change these policies? So sometimes, and this is my own personal thing I know I've done, you think about policy and you go straight to Washington. There are so many policies where you work, where you live, where you play, that you can impact more easily, and those policies can often lead to better policies at a larger level.
Nicole, I appreciate what you said, because you answered what was going to be my next question about sort of politically, what can we do, and thinking about voting, but how that's not enough. And so we can do all of these things on multiple levels in places that we have influence. So I appreciate that. I'm going to ask about collaborating across sectors, because that's how our organization is set up. We're a cross-sector organization. And so I wanted to ask about when you think about collaborations, how can reproductive health professionals in whatever capacity, all of y'all's capacities, work with policymakers, advocates, just across the sectors? What are some things that you think about, or even what are some things that you want to do in the collaborative space?
Well, I'm going to take this one since my next call is with the Maternal Morbidity and Mortality Review Committees here in Washington State. And for the participants of this webinar who don't know what that is, because we've talked about a couple of different things, I want to make sure we connect the dots for you all. When there is a maternal death in most states in the United States, those deaths are reviewed. So there is it's not a legal investigation, but what it is it's almost a post-mortem on, the medical record. There's conversation from the clinical team. And so it is a situation where we can use the data of the dead to try and look at what's not working in our systems to be able to prevent those breakdown in those systems from occurring again. And I would be remiss if I did not mention Kimberly Seals-Allers from the Earth app, who always says we have just as much to learn from the living as we do the dead, right? So for me, when you think about cross-sectional, it's really this idea, this notion of where within our society, and I'm purposefully using that word, are we missing out opportunities to really be able to improve health outcomes? Because I can just tell you, pregnant people don't exist in a vacuum. They just not in their living room on the couch eating bonbons, right? Half the births in the United States are paid for by public insurance or Medicaid. That tells you these are low-income people, probably languishing in low-income professions. These people are working. And it's not just at Walmart and Target. You got people driving around pregnant for Lyft and Uber picking you up. Right? So as we continue to think about how we structure our system, if you're a boss or if you are, give your workers paid family leave, right? If you do not participate in the state or federal match for healthcare spending accounts that will allow for people to use those pre-tax dollars to cover doulas, we did a whole toolkit on this. Right? There are small wins that I think that we can really work with collaboratively, and employers are the least subscribed people because they're doing the least because they think they're just providing insurance for their employees and that's enough. But it's not, right? The fact that people can't get full salary using the disability system, and God forbid you have an ICU stay or you're a near miss or your baby's in the NICU, because you're going to burn through that time. And guess what? You got to go back to work. That's cruel, right? Or when we think about reproductive justice, when you think about people having to travel across state lines and take time off to seek, medication abortion care or abortion care, and they got to have childcare for their kids at home and all this other stuff, right? We need to tell the truth about people's reproductive trajectories across a life course, and how, as a society, we're structured not to set people up for success. And that means within whatever your sphere of influence is, that you are able to make somebody's life better, easier. I mean, I think about churches, right? It is amazing to me that you got people spending $100 a minute when kids are late in childcare. And you got Sunday school, but you ain't got some other place where kids can go, where parents aren't going to be charged some exorbitant amount of money. Like, come on, y'all. Like, there are other ways for us to be thinking strategically about how we can leverage all the different resources that we have to be able to improve reproductive health outcomes across a trajectory.
And I'm just gonna move with that, this circle of influence, and that to me is so critical, because we really do have to operate where we can in the moment. And I do think that we have a responsibility wherever we are to tackle the issue. And I think like one simple example, I was a part of this business development cohort with this organization here in New Orleans. And this was probably 2022 or 20, well, whatever. Anyway, like maybe 8 years ago. Recently, the woman who was the ED had a baby. So I go there for an alumni event, and guess what they have now? A breastfeeding lounge. They never had that, right? Even as the ED, that didn't matter to her necessarily, probably not from a place of anger or dismay or whatever. It just never even crossed her mind. But then when she had her baby, so it's like back pow, now she can do this. So now every small and large business that comes into this business incubator system sees that. And she can tell her story about what that did for her experience as a new mother coming back to work and still wanting to breastfeed her baby. That said, I also want to just say this is my own personal thing, that I was not very politically involved in terms of voting and contacting legislators and all of that stuff until very recently. And it has been amazing to me that you really can pick up the phone and send an email and meet somebody at a meeting and call a meeting with them and show up in their office and give them advice, thoughts, and comments on what you think about a particular policy. They really do listen. They really do hear it. I never would have believed it, y'all, myself, but I've come to know that not all of them, but some of them really do care and they really do listen. And then some of the policies that are just constantly in my head around improving Black maternal health and maternal health in general, again, it goes back to me being a nurse and an advanced practice nurse practitioner, and every state is going to be different as the way that this works, but there are many policies in states that prohibit the ease of practice of advanced practice nurses. Whether it's opening a birth center, whether it's the ability to hang a shingle and just do the work. Here in Louisiana, we have something called the Collaborative Practice Agreement, which is nothing but a hindrance. During the COVID time, they had an emergency order. They released the Collaborative Practice Agreement, which is a thing that mandates that advanced practice nurse has a physician in her back pocket to collaborate with her in a certain way. When we have this collaborative practice agreement, research tells us across the country that it impacts nurse practitioners' ability to serve their communities, and nurse practitioners and nurse midwives included in that are more likely to go into these rural areas, into low-income communities where they can support the people in those communities. But the policies and the reimbursement, why am I getting reimbursed 70% and I'm actually doing a better job than the person getting reimbursed 100%? I'm confused. So when we think about some of those are some of the other things that I just want to throw out there for people to think about in terms of policies and things that you might not even be thinking about because it's not your lane. But yeah, that part. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, I want to affirm everything my co-panelists have said. When we present, sometimes we say, raise your hand if you were born. And if you have to raise your hand, that means it impacts you. So that means that we need to be thinking about every single facet of life, break the silos, and every single sector in every country should be considering maternal health outcomes and maternal health protections and wraparound services in all that they do, whether it's employment, whether it is in your churches, whether it is in transportation, wherever you do. It shouldn't just be a healthcare thing, right? It impacts everybody everywhere. So we need to stop working in silos. We need to start putting these considerations in all that we do. The other thing is that, collaborating, building those relationships, speaking up. What I've noticed too is a lot of people who make decisions have these degrees of separation from the issue. So kind of like what Nicole was just saying, they didn't even think about these things because it doesn't personally impact them. So it wasn't considered when they were making these decisions. So in addition to like speaking up, you see something, you say something, you share your story. Even like Dr. McLemore was saying with the maternal mortality review committees in North Carolina last year, they found that 70% of maternal deaths had an element of discrimination. I think if the public knew that, and that would make it real to the public. So not only do we need information fed up to our providers, we need for the providers to feed information down to the public so we have a more comprehensive and holistic understanding of the issue of what we're dealing with, so we can all band together in our, circles of influence to really figure out how we're going to tackle this problem. The farmers, everybody should be like having a maternal health component to their strategies, to their plans, so that we can all work together and do this. And so it's definitely got to be bi-directional. Advocates, we got to get a little louder, empower. I am my sister's keeper, empower them to speak up. Providers are, especially our ally providers, encourage them to get into groups and numbers and speak up. And this is possible. 84.2% of deaths are preventable. We don't have to go through this at all. So it's very possible. So let's get it done.
Listen, I really wish we had more time with you all. I appreciate that. Well, it's been multiple mic drops throughout this webinar. I appreciate ending on this, what we need to do. And that seems like centering reproductive justice in our society. So I want to thank all of you all for being here, our panelists and our audience. This is being recorded and it will be available in multiple places, including our resource library on our website. So just thank you all so much for being here. We are going to share a survey with you all that you all can access. It's pretty short. It's just, what did you learn from this survey? How can we do better? All those types of things. We are going to conclude our session today and invite you to join us on November 19th for our next webinar. It is going to be a town hall style webinar. Given our election coming up, things may be very different from what they are now. And they also might be the same. We still have all of these health equity issues in the current climate that we're in. So November 19th, you can send in questions to this town hall. We also have a workshop coming up on mobilizing community health. With that, I want to thank you all and really appreciate you. Have a good day. Yes, you can go. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank
I
you
was
so
like, I
much.
thought we were going to have a post-call powwow.
No,
All
we're
right.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoyed
Thank
it.
you. Thanks.